Hello, and welcome to the Love Life, Live Life Fitness podcast, the premier podcast where we talk about topics ranging from health and fitness, performance and sport, and wellness and rehabilitation. We tie these topics together to understand their impact on our daily lives and our journey to be the best version of ourselves. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. Today, we would like to welcome Michelle. Michelle, thank you for coming on, and would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've always been an athlete. Like I played basketball and soccer and field hockey, ran track and field as an athlete. But through that time, like sports have always been continue to be a big part of my life. I actually didn't even discover the weight room until like my junior year of high school. My sprints coach was, we were training in the summer, and he's like, "Do you lift weights?" And I was like, "Nope." And so he more or less got me in there, and we were in there like 2-3 times a week after doing track workouts. And so if you've ever done that midsummer, that's pretty brutal. But from there it was just kind of like through that experience and just other parts of sports, like it just kind of really put me on this trajectory that I'm on now.
Awesome. And with that trajectory that you're on right now, how would you say it kind of helps you into your day-to-day life in terms of working with athletes and being a strength conditioning professional?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just understand like relatability, like me understanding, maybe the mental or physical hardships that I'm, putting them through, but also like understanding, a lot of the time I had a great coach that explained a lot of the why I was doing something and like what was I building toward. And so I think that made a big impression on me. And so that's something I try to carry into my coaching. You know, um, and you always can tell when the athlete wants more or less. So I think, always making sure that's having a good read on that as well. But yeah, I think, that impression also just took me into my studies. I went to Bloomsburg for my, bachelor's and master's, and, that was such a great place. It still really is close to me. Like I'm really still close with those professors and the academia there. But after that, then I just decided, that I should intern a lot. So then I started interning for, at Bucknell once in my undergrad, and then again in my, graduate studies. And then I interned at UPenn for 2.5 years. And through that summation of interning, I just got thousands of reps of coaching and like seeing really strong, impactful coaches. And that led me to my first job. To Swarthmore Media with Chris McPherson, who's still there. And I was actually just chatting with him before this. And then I went to UPenn, then as an assistant coach, got to work with 8 teams, one of them being women's soccer. And then like that really got me into, training prescriptions and athlete monitoring of GPS and heart rate. And from there led me to Rutgers, just doing what I do now with field hockey and women's rowing.
Awesome. That's a great route, and seeing how, you've been to these different universities and you had both academic experience, but then you went and got intern experience. Would you say that in that intern experience, is there things that you really took away as an intern that has actually continued to apply in terms of coaching and prescription for your athletes
Mm.
now?
Yeah, I think it's really understated, but when you're interning, it's really important to get as many hours on the floor as possible. It's something you don't know until you know it, in the sense of how valuable it is. So I think for me is why it's so valuable is because I've seen so many when I was at, Bucknell and University of Pennsylvania, I saw so many different cultures and training backgrounds and training statuses that like, I could see the wonkiest form and I'm going to know how to break it down for that athlete and progress them and regress them. And those types of tools are invaluable. And because that's where you really build your connection and buy-in with your athlete. So that's something is invaluable that I learned from or, obtained from my internships. Second is really knowing how to like read people and to build that connection and, a connection of just like we're in this in training environment, and um, you know, can I get to know you, within reason of like this hour we're going to be together, or two, and can I really communicate concisely and execute this for you, that you come in the next day and be like, yeah, this is a high performance environment. I'm going to give my best because I believe that this is the place I'm supposed to be. So seeing that and then trying to embody that every day is something I think is really important, and something I try to do every day for my program.
Awesome. That's great. Would you say that um, when you're looking at programming and understanding the athletes that you're working with, are there things that you really say right now are diving into, or things that you kind of try to build upon or expand, or even investigate slash explore when you're looking at your programming or things going forward? Overall, what things are you starting to look at and interest that might be beneficial for you going forward?
Yeah, I think you know, contraction rate is something that's always been like a big interest of mine. Like, the phrase speed kills, like how can you optimize that and build resiliency and repeatability within the weight room? And, you know, there's a lot of, talk about like the force velocity curve, right? Absolutely. And then what is the best way to skin that with still, you know, emphasizing speed development? Or is it just, or if it's just aerobic capacity, like what are those tools? So I think over my career is trying to figure out this model that really complements that, but then also how do you individualize it based on your training status? So you have this model, but now I think the real, I'm in this fun environment where I have field hockey players and even rowers that have done a lot of weight training and then zero. And so, how do I take this model that I've formed and now build it out to these athletes? And so I really think the past 6 years has been building it out to, okay, you're in phase 0 and now you're in phase 10. And how do I, how am I going to implement this within a, either 20, 27 or 85 person lift?
Man, that
So
is, yeah, so that's a lot to actually, think about and conceptualize, when you have, these group of teams that sometimes have very small rosters compared to those who have a little bit bigger, trying to, find it manageable, whether it's just you on the floor or you might have interns or other coaches assisting you. Like, how are you actually going to, make it happen? With that being said, do you think that in the populations that you work with right now, do you think that it's you know easier or harder compared to say when you were at UPenn or other stops that you had along the way? Do you think that the way you have worked on and programmed and developed your models, do you think it's become a little bit easier or trickier in different ways?
I think a little bit of both. I think anytime you spend more time with your craft, like you've built models and you've figured out some ways to be more efficient, or so I definitely think the way I work is definitely smarter and better. I also am blessed to have tools, like I have an AMS system, so my time is definitely more efficient than it was even 2 years ago. So I do think, as you continue to be in this profession, if you're not using AI, you are silly. There are so many great things from it. I think how you use it's important, but I really hope every strength coach is using that tool. But I think the things that make it tricky is always one, we're in this new phase of data governance, so making sure your like university has policies around that. But so if they don't use it. But I think the things that make it tricky is just like we're in a gray area for a lot of stuff right now, and it's a good thing because stuff needs to be standardized and there need to be policies and stuff. But yeah, I think that's just the tricky part, is because like there's all these tools, but what are the right things, the wrong things to do? And the Big Ten is working on it, NCAA is working on it, so it's all good things, but that's just where it's tricky. It's like, do you do it now and get a slap on the wrist, or do you do it now and try to build those standards and procedures so you are good and set and stuff like that? So I know those things are going on behind the scenes, and I think that's the only part that makes it tricky. But I think this day and age of like strength conditioning or athlete performance, yeah, we're quite spoiled with the tools we have, because you can still learn R. You still can learn all the tools. You can use Claude to help you build Power BI. So it just depends, like, where you now want to invest your time in building something, or are you going to outsource, and or do you have other priorities that standpoint, right? So like, I know this is less about programming, but like things that make it tricky is like you're always going to have a lot of low hanging fruits that you got to do. Like, it doesn't matter what organization you're at. So for me, it's like I'd rather outsource my AMS so I can do a lot of more stuff of like educating athletes, educating coaches, spending more time on training prescriptions and exercise interventions, or making sure those reports and those things are what are going to make an impact to the program. So where like others are like, no, I really want to build it and have full governance over my data. So like, it's what I want to look at. And yeah, it just depends what your priorities are, or what you see is going to be really valuable or impactful.
And that's a great way of like saying it and just kind of being honest, because I mean, at the end of the day, you have 24 hours. It's, how much time do you need to allocate toward, you know, programming or doing, whatever priorities that you have to, compared to, other people. They might have a little bit more time in the day, or other days might be a little bit more flexible, so they can explore those different tools that, they may not be as familiar with. And so I think that's a great way of like going about it. I think, to outsource or to not outsource, what's going to be most beneficial for the time and the resources that you have available. And I think
Mhm.
that's great. At the end of the day, you know, you have a job to do, and it's to help these athletes get better, or to help the team, win, or just do the best that they can. And I think understanding that and being real with yourself, it's everybody, especially strength conditioning professionals in different capacities. You're curious, you want to learn more, you want to program, you want to do all the things that are going to be new, old, not old, anything that's going to be enhancing your knowledge, enhancing athletes, their capabilities to win. But I think understanding and being realistic about what what priorities that you do have, just as you were mentioning, I think that is really important. And sometimes that's, sometimes you can't do it all by yourself. So you do
Mhm.
have to have other people to conversate with or negotiate and just find ways to work around. So I think that's a great way of doing things.
Yeah,
Um,
and like every priority should just be set by like whatever's contextual,
mhm.
right? Like I can have my priorities of what I think needs to be done, and it's only based on contextually of my team. Like, it's not what I think the standard of where strength conditioning is going. It's just like, this is what my team needs. So if I need more time educating, then that's what I need to do.
Mhm. Okay, cool. Right now, in terms of where you're at, being at Rutgers and the populations that you work with, I know we were talking beforehand about kind of different topics about testing and performance. Is there anything right now that you kind of talked about also contraction time?
Mhm.
Is there things that you're curious overall? And I know you have and given presentations about, exercise prescription programming, training interventions. Is there things right now that you're kind of more curious about, whether you utilize it or not?
Mhm. Yeah, I think and it's really based on like, I'll keep this specific to field hockey, but like it's tough to set benchmarks for field hockey because there's really limited normative data for that sport. There's a meta-analysis that has, I even forget, but let's just say 12 plus professional clubs. In Europe, they call them clubs. So there's clubs that, or even national teams that are part of this meta-analysis, and it extensively goes into their normative data of how they collect it. The issue with GPS is everyone collects the data differently. So, but also they're not even collecting the same stuff, right? So not everyone's doing high speed running, very high speed running, sprint distance, maximal sprints. There's so many ways to have terminology as well. So that's just really tough. So I think that's something I'm interested of. I actually had the thought early this week of like, do I try to start this initiative of setting normative data, even just within NCAA? Do I start this process of reaching out and saying, would you would you consider? I don't even know how to go about it yet, but that is something I'm interested of. Like, one, it would just benefit the field in general, and then two, it'd benefit the sport. It'd be actually quite impactful for the sport in general because they're trying their best to figure it out on their own, and it just feels wrong. Like they're trying to figure it out. So I think that's something I'm interested in. I think it ties really well also with sports science in general. Like that's a big role that sports science can provide to training. So that's currently what I'm really interested in from like a field perspective, because also that's going to help. And then maybe take that one step further and then take that into internal loading, do an A, then a B, and then give a full comprehensive of normative data for like elite Division I field hockey, and then see if I can branch that into the professional world. But the other thing with like true training is honestly, yeah, the contraction time, but also like, I was at the sports science symposium at the end of May. They talk about, GPS is one way of tracking, but then you can also do ADI, right? Where you're getting full comprehensive like mechanical loading, and they're tracking, the angles and the velocities you're coming off of those change directions. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds fantastic. Because more times than not, like, especially if you're familiar with like manipulating dimension of pitch, um, and just for load prescription, there's a lot of times that those smaller size pitches actually are really, really mechanical loading on joints, because it's a small small area and a higher frequency of change direction. So I think it'd be very, very interesting to then get those true velocities off of then that small sided game, because you can't get that with GPS. Like, you're getting it, but you're not, because it's not that sensitive to those types of accelerations and decelerations. So they would call them micro accelerations and decelerations. So yeah, that's something I'm interested in. Do I have access to it? No, but it is something that keeps in my mind throughout the day.
Yeah, no, that sounds like really interesting. I think that that could be utilized again, as you're mentioning, very well because, if there's especially areas, it's always about in applied research settings, it's always at the end of research papers, future directions to look at. And I think that is really, and especially coming from you being in the applied setting and actually coaching, understanding, the differences or, well, one, benchmarking, but also how next the internal loading factors, and then also understanding the differences between small sided gains on different pitch sizes. Just as you were saying, I think that all those just say, and the ideas that you're describing and having, that just says so much about how far that, say, field hockey, for example, has to grow in terms of both research, but also the coaching aspect of it. So I think, I mean, sounds like you could be a big pioneer for that realm. So I think that would be really cool. I think you should pursue it if you can.
Oh, thank you. I'm definitely down for help, because I definitely couldn't do it alone.
That's okay. Well, you never know. I mean, I'm sure you're connected, and there's a lot of things that I think, I'm sure if you have conversations with other sport coaches as well as strength conditioning professionals at other universities, I'm sure they either have similar ideas or maybe a little spin off idea that you could probably tie together. So I think you should pursue.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mhm. I was going to ask you, with being a coach, being a former track athlete, doing all the things that you're doing now, how has fitness influenced your life?
Yeah, it's influenced it in like a couple of different ways. Being a track athlete, um, and a field sport athlete, injury is always like catastrophic. So I had one in high school. I tore my quad, and within recent years, then I like had a grade 2 like hamstring strain, and it's so hard, especially when you're so used to like training and doing things a certain way. So I think through that experience, it really just, like, the comeback off of that and stuff really has taught me, one, like what true consistency is. Like, there's the generic way of saying like, oh, we need to be consistent, but when you're coming back from injury, Like true consistency is hell or high come water, like do or die. You're here today. It doesn't matter how well you do it, you do it. And that's if my athlete was listening, she'd be like, she says that every day. And that's something that really has formed into my like embodiment of like every day, but also of fitness, of like it doesn't matter how poor I do this today, do it. Just do it. Get it done. Consistency. Um, that was also really like built in within like bodybuilding and powerlifting of like do it, just do it now, get it done, do it, complete it. And obviously a high effort, high intent, but when you're injured, everything feels high intent, like because you're just struggling. But I also think like through my other parts of like fitness and training, it really goes back to the consistency. Like I'm a very like I'm big into reflection. I reflect a lot. So I think just having that daily, even moment to moment throughout the day reflection, fitness just like really taught me confidence. And even through injury, like confidence of, I didn't think I could do it, or holy crap, now I'm doing this, or, you know, at one point I was like, I weigh 135 pounds and I'm gonna deadlift 315. Like I never thought I could do that. So I think just that being it really taught me like processing confidence and what true consistency is. It's not just like showing up every day kind of thing.
No, that's really true. I think that's, anybody, once you get to that factor of like consistency and understanding, that, sometimes you start out showing up, and then once you get going, you're like, so now this is, it's a habit, but then it becomes, it's a lifestyle. It's like, this is just part of my life. And I think, especially with healthy habits, that's very important to keep being consistent at. And I think that's really cool how you utilized, say, past injuries that have occurred, and then really honed in on the fact that, at the end of the day, I have to get better. And being that being being that said, that by getting better, it's you have to work at it. And kind of like anything, the better, the more reps you get at it, you're going to you could get better. Sometimes you could get worse at if you're doing all wrong reps, but hopefully with injury, with the healing process and everything going on, you're going to be getting better over time. So I think that's really cool how you utilize that and how that has influenced not only you for your betterment for consistency, but also the confidence factor that you were mentioning. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
For anyone listening or who may listen to this in the future, what advice would you give to someone looking to, you know, have an education such as yours, get experience in interning, or eventually being in a position such as that you're in right now? Is there
Mm-hmm.
any advice that you would give to anybody?
Yeah, if you're just starting as like a really, as a young student, and you've decided that like, yep, I want to train with athletes and I want to be in a high performance, like you got to get your butt in the door. You got to get in a weight room. Doesn't matter if it's Division 1, 2, or 3. Get yourself in the door, and watching with a notebook in your hand. Like write down the questions, write down the things you observe. Like you may feel really weird, but there's no way you're going to remember everything in an hour for multiple hours that you learned that day. So that's first thing. Second thing is definitely read as much as you can. Like you're to start making when you're young, to start making a personal sacrifice is good because you'll be able to reel it in as you get older. So make that personal sacrifice now so you can work and then have your personal time when you get older. That's something I do now. And then, really allow yourself to build your confidence. And to do that, definitely examples of mentors and leaders are how I built mine. So, I wouldn't be a strong female coach if I didn't have examples from like Christy Bartlett and Tracy Zimmer when they were at University of Pennsylvania. So find somebody that will be a good mentor to you, and then once when you feel like, oh, I want a little bit more mentorship or learning, then go coach. But do all that in that order. Like you gotta be a sponge first before you really feel like you can start to work on your practical sense. That's my opinion.
Awesome. That's great. And with this podcast being the Love Life, Live Life Fitness podcast, I have to ask you, for you, what does it mean to love your life and live your life?
Yeah. Yeah, I think of this in like two separate parts, to like love your it was like love your life, right?
Mhm.
To love your life, I think that's based on like what you allow yourself to focus on or to spend your time with. So, I mentioned like at first, like even in my own career, I sacrificed a lot of personal time to to intern or to work to become the best coach I could be. But now I'm in a place where like I'm in a new phase where I'm like I really love what I do, but I really want to love my whole life. So I think, now being a little bit older, love your life is really what you decide it to be and how you maintain it.
Awesome. I think that's great. It's like sometimes you might sacrifice different things to for the betterment of your own life. And I think that setting yourself up well, you know, sometimes people change careers, but whatever you're trying to do, if there's something that you're focused on, setting yourself up well, it really is it's a sacrifice for yourself because you love yourself that much, not in like an arrogant or prideful way, but you love yourself
Hmm.
enough that you want yourself to be successful and do things. So I think that's great that you're doing that and that you
Yeah.
have that as well.
Yeah. And I think like to like live your life is like what you allow to like occupy yourself. Cause like a lot of times you do a lot of stuff for others, or like you have a hard day, or something you really wanted to implement just didn't happen or didn't work, and like then it can more or less consume you. I've been really lucky that I don't have that tendency to let something like over consume me, but I do work with a lot of other colleagues that that is a challenge. um, and I think the more that you allow yourself to like evaluate, plan, and then try to go from there. I think that allows you to live your life. And I'm still human. There's still days that I get wrapped up in something, but I think the more that the way you let either life, events, people affect your mind, heart, and soul, like that what allows you to live your life.
And Michelle, you bring such great experience and advice and just being real with how you go about yourself and the way that you're trying to help the athletes that you're with. I think that's really a testimony to you and the people that you've worked with of how much you care. And so thank you very much for just everything that you've been talking about from the time that we were talking before we even started recording to even now. So I think it's been just great learning from you about all these things because even from talking with you when we met before, I think there's so much to learn from you. And I think that anyone who's listening now or who may learn from you or find find you through one of your speaks or your talks or just hear more about you, I think you're going to be a great mentor or and probably are a great mentor to others right now. So just keep doing what you're doing because I think it's really great hearing from you.
Oh, I really appreciate that. That's really sweet.
No problem. Also, with that, so people can maybe become your mentees, where is the best place that people can reach you?
Yeah. I'm mostly on Instagram at at coach_Pifer. You can shoot me a message, you shoot me DM, whatever, and I'm pretty good at getting back into like a day or so after.
Awesome. Well, Michelle, I really appreciate you coming on, and obviously got to plug you in because I know you have a big talk coming up at a pretty important conference, and I'm sure there will be plenty more. Even after this podcast is online for a while, I know you'll have other talks. So definitely, thank you very much for coming on, and I hopefully get to talk with you and catch up with you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I really had fun.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I also want to thank our wonderful guests for coming on today. For more content, you can find us on Instagram at Love Life Live Life Fitness. Stay tuned for our next episode, and as always, love your life and live your life.